Hi folks, it's Dr. E and I'm here with the instructional video to walk you through the reading journal assignment for English 2323. I know this has been a pretty heavy 2 weeks in terms of videos and information, and you may be a little bit overwhelmed. That's okay, just take it all in stride. Watch the videos when you have actual time to sit and concentrate. Rewatch them when necessary, just so that you're making sure that you're meeting the guidelines and expectations for each of these assignments. So starting in week 2, we need to start keeping a document that's our reading journal, and it's just going to kind of catalog all the things that we read throughout the semester, and it will be due at a few different points. So your reading journal, you'll start this week, but it's not due at the end of the week. It's going to be a running document for a couple of weeks, then you'll submit it, the single document for all the readings, you'll submit it, and then you'll start a new document for those readings that follow. Okay, so it's just kind of keeping track of our readings and our ideas. I'm going to pull up the handout, which is located on D2L, and so it just says, the goal is just to make sure that we're engaging, right? So that we're practicing our critical thinking as we read, and we're not just kind of walking through the readings to check those off a list. Like, okay, I have all of this to read in English, I'm going to check it off, then I have all of this to read in biology or whatever the classes are. We want you to use your time efficiently, so you shouldn't have to reread anything because you're kind of losing your focus or you're tired. Having some sort of document that you are using to keep track of your ideas can be really helpful. Okay, so I put it's a waste of your time and energy to reread things when you can be actively engaged the first time, remember what you read, and then also have a way to write them down so you can revisit them. So beginning in week 2, you're going to keep a journal for all the readings, and I put, show that you've read the text, but don't just show a surface level reading. To actively engage, you want to show critical thinking, so it's not just summary, right? It's pushing your ideas beyond that. So some readings are going to be background, right? So we have the introduction to a time period in week 2. We have biographies of all the authors. We will always have the biographies. And much of what we're going to read in this class are primary texts, right? Which means those are texts that were written at the time period. So to give you an example, the introductory reading this week on the Romantic era is not a primary text because it was not written in the Romantic era, right? It's just giving some of the background, and it's written by our editor. We'll always just reference Stephen Greenblatt. He's the overall general editor, so we'll give him credit knowing that there are several editors that work with him to produce this entire text. So we want to make sure that we are, focusing our attention on some of the background reading in addition to the biographies. These, for every single author, we will have a biography that we read. These people didn't write their own biographies, right? They are written by our text editors. So we want to keep track of who is writing what. And then the primary texts are going to be those texts, again, written at the time. So for this week, we're reading Anna Letitia Barbald's biography. That's written by our editors. And then we are reading her poem, The Mouse's Petition, which is the primary text because she wrote it and produced it in the time period we're studying. So it's that primary text. Okay. So the reading journal provides a way to collect our ideas, in a document, and it's what we learn about British literature for sure, but also what about the time periods? What about the authors, the perspectives, right? I put, here, start by reading a text in whatever way works for you. If you have the print version, do you take written notes? Are you going to use Post-its? Are you going to underline or highlight? Some of you may not be able to write in your text, so maybe coming up with an alternative. You want some way to keep track of your ideas as you read through. I have a print version, so I actually go in and write in the margins. I use Post-it notes. If you have the electronic version, Norton Publishing has a really good feature where you can highlight text, you can leave notes, right? So it's the same thing as if you were writing it down, it's just all electronic. You need to have some way to focus your attention on what you're reading. Again, if you're just reading and you're not making any notes, you're not doing anything other than just sitting and staring at the page, you are not going to take in the information in a critical and engaging way, right? You're just reading to read. We want to read to understand, to engage, to comprehend, and to think critically about what it is that we are reading, okay? So I'm going to come back to this document, right? And so I'm going to skip down, read all this when you have the time, revisit it, and I'm going to go to format. So for each reading, you're going to create a separate entry, but in a single document. So I put in a Word format. I'm going to provide a template, please use it. And I put there's no reason to go through the pain of adjusting a document to meet MLA requirements and to meet my requirements. So just use the template, okay? So each entry should include the text title and author's name. So, and I put here, note for the course text, you only need to reference the main editor, Stephen Greenblatt. So any of those background readings about time periods or biographies, give Greenblatt that credit, okay? There are different editors that write each of the sections, but we're just going to give Greenblatt the overall credit, okay? So for every entry, you want to provide a summary and response. So in a paragraph or two, you're going to summarize the overall ideas, like what is the point? You should be technical in that summary. So no opinions, no assertions, no judgments, no, oh, this is really good. No, just strictly identifying the author's main points, who is the audience, right? In the second paragraph or two, you'll then kind of focus in on a key idea or concept to then kind of push it more deeply, to engage more deeply. So what interested you? Why? What did you learn? Finally, you're going to choose a quote that's important in some way. Remember, you need to be accurate. The quote needs to be correct word for word. It needs to be properly formatted using quotation marks, following MLA formatting, I'll give you an example, so just bear with me. Here's the grading rubric, and it's essentially, for an A or high B, we want to stick to these. You're just doing everything you need to do in each section. Your quote is present, properly cited. You offer an explanation for every quote. I shouldn't have to guess why you chose this quote, right? You're going to explain your choice. Your response is showing that critical level of thinking and reading. And then your writing reveals that you are understanding those main ideas, right? You're not just skimming and kind of guessing at the main ideas. You have done the reading and you're showing that in your summary, okay? So here is just a really vague example just to give you an idea of how it's formatted. So you have your heading here, page number here. Remember to, insert your last name by the page number. So just double click, put your last name here. Again, I'll have the template, so don't worry too much right now. Put the reading journal from, and it starts with week 2 and it will end in week 4, for the first document that's due. And so I put here in quotation marks, the romantic period, right? Because we're dealing with essentially a chapter in an anthology or an entry in an anthology. So we always use quotation marks. And then I just put by Greenblatt. You can put by Greenblatt. You don't need to put his first name or anything. I know it. So here we have the summary. And I put Greenblatt's goal in this chapter is to identify, and then you're going to talk about those main ideas, right? You're going to summarize. Greenblatt includes information about, okay, so it's a pretty long chapter, so it's going to take some work to break it down to those main ideas. Then you have the response, right? Though much of Greenblatt's chapter offers introductory information, he also delves into, you're adding your own input there, right? You're not just basing that part on summary, you are responding to what you're reading. You're showing that you've read and you're kind of digging more deeply into something about that chapter, okay? And then, so you have 1 to 2 paragraphs here, and then you have a quote. And I just put insert a quote from the text here. Make sure you got your quotation marks. Make sure you have your parenthetical citation with the page number, okay? And then you offer an explanation. And then I put here, include either a line or a few spaces to separate your entries. So under this first entry for the romantic period, you would then have an entry for Barbald, right? That's the next reading that we'll cover. So that's just kind of the gist, and I've gone through it pretty quickly, so take some time to really read that document. But I want to show you the template also, which looks very much like the example, but this is what's posted on D2L and that you should use, okay? So this is the template. Oops, I'm sorry, it should be 2323, my bad. So make sure that you're updating your last name. So in a Word document, just double click up here, take this out and type in your last name, and then double click outside of that area. Please don't manually enter your header. Let Microsoft Word do it for you by having it up in this kind of grayed out space. Okay, you have all your heading information, you have your title, and then I put here insert title and author here. So let's say we already have Greenblatt's like we did in the previous. So I'm going to Okay, so I want you to note that we have not only the biography by Greenblatt, which is pretty basic. I just want you to show that you've read, right? So that's going to be pretty brief information. You don't necessarily have to have 2 paragraphs in the summary and the response. I just want you to show that you've read, right? So then you're going to go to the template, offer this information, and then we have the actual piece, the actual primary text by Barbald, okay? So y'all, I admit that this week we're doing quite a bit. You will not always have this many entries to complete for a week, but as I mentioned before, we're just kind of hitting the ground running and kind of getting some of that good background information, and then we'll settle into 1 to 2 readings a week, okay? The biographies add an additional step, but it's really important that we read that because it again gives us that context and helps us understand the text that was written by this person, right? And why, right? So finally, so you'll have Greenblatt's first, the biography second, the poem third, and then you'll also have an entry for Adichie's video, okay? So you can just put okay? And then you'll do the same thing. So even though this is a video that we're watching for the class, it's still considered a text, right? It's still adding to our understanding of what we're reading and what we want to focus on this semester, okay? So this is just a brief kind of entry into the assignment. I would definitely recommend that you start working on it this week so that you're not waiting until the night before it's due and having to go back to all the readings. Please don't do that. I'm a procrastinator at heart. I understand the necessity to feel like you have to do that. Please don't. Okay. Again, make sure you're revising and editing and doing all of that good stuff. If you do have any questions, feel free to post in the Q&A area of the discussion board, or you can always send me an email. All right, take care, hang in there.